It's time for the Roots and Roots Show with your host, Greg Rashid, bringing you history and music from the Black American diaspora. Greg and his guests' goal is to root the show's information in your psyche, providing you the roots to expand knowledge within your community. Now here's your host, Greg Rashid.
Well, Swati Cop to everyone out there. This is Greg Rashid with another edition of the Root and Root Show, heard by many people at their convenience on various platforms on the internet. And yes, Swati Cop, if you're new to the program, Swati Cop means hello in Thai. Yes, I'm in Bangkok, Thailand, and you may hear some ambient noises in the background, birds going past. I'm out here and I can look outside and see folks selling. You might hear some people selling fruit. You might hear, and the elections are coming up here, so you might hear people in the background asking folks for vote, and you'll hear somebody saying, Bert, Bert, that means vote. That means vote. So you might hear that in the background. But a lot of my listeners, they love to hear the sounds of Bangkok, Thailand. So I like to have those on my show. But, we're going to have, as always, a great show. And I want to thank those folks who listen all over the world, especially my new listeners in Brazil. Got folks in, believe it or not, Siberia. I couldn't believe that. Got folks there. But like I said, a lot of people listen at various platforms online at their convenience. But a lot of folks listen every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on KUHSdenver.com, the station that was created by the one and only, the king of Cinco de Mayo himself, Henry Archuleta. And I want to say a happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone who's listening to this show during the weekend celebration of Cinco de Mayo. Hope you're having a wonderful and safe time, especially because I know I miss being in Colorado during this time of year because it was a blast during Cinco de Mayo. But anyway, we're going to have a wonderful show today. Again, and I just am so honored to have as my guest. He's been on the show a number of times, and listeners really love him. And you can't help but love the guy. I mean, he is just fascinating. I wish the show was like a whole week to talk to him. Even then, I couldn't get all the information that I want from him. I'm talking about the one and only historian. He's called the Negro League historian, but he is the historian of Americana. He's a historian of just more than just Negro League baseball. What I'm talking about is Phil S. Dixon. His new book is it's a revised book on the life of Buck O'Neil. But he has so many books out there. He has so many things, and the guy is just incredible. And I'm just so happy to have Phil on. Are you there, Phil?
I am here. I am here, Greg.
Yep, I am just so happy to have you on again. And I think I told you before, when I came back here to Thailand, this was during the pandemic. I had to go on quarantine. Everyone who comes back had to go on quarantine. And what I used for that week in quarantine to keep me sane is I reread your photographic history of the Negro Leagues that came out many, many years ago, but it is so relevant. And I just love this book.
31 years ago. 31 years ago.
God, I can't believe it's been that long since I first got this.
Man. It's a picture of me and they're pretty young. I said, man.
Well, you look the same, I mean, you don't have the afro now, but you're basically
I don't have the afro's gone now.
But you look the same. Everything's still cool, and that's because you're always going out there seeking the knowledge, bringing the knowledge to so many folks out there. And I love all the books you have, all the stuff you do. And this latest book, before we talk about that, I want to, some of my listeners may not be familiar with your background. They might want to know, how did you get involved in, researching the Negro Leagues, Black baseball? How did you start that?
Well, I always tell people my baseball introduction was really through baseball cards. And back in '64, I started collecting Beatles cards. That's what it started off with.
Oh.
And I made the mistake of taking them to school, and the teacher said these are not collectibles. She looked at them as toys, and she took my Beatles cards. So I went to the store to buy more Beatles cards, and they're sold out. The only thing left was baseball cards. And that was in 1964. I think I was in the second grade,
Oh man.
and I used to go to the store for people in my neighborhood. Matter of fact, there's a lady. Her name was Miss Davis. I need to dedicate a book to her because she was the one who sent me to the store all the time and gave me nickels and dimes. And man, if I went further away, she'd give me a quarter. Man, you could, and back then you could buy a comic book for a dime,
Hey.
and the baseball cards were like 5 cents for a pack. But I can even remember penny packs where it had a stick of gum and a card in it. So I even bought penny packs, and yeah. So she sent me to the store, and her two things that I remember getting for her more than anything was snuff and skim milk. She'd call ahead and tell them Dixon's coming down there, pick up my snuff because they wouldn't let a kid pick that up.
Right.
And I
Now,
go
I used
get
to
it,
do
but
those type of
that's how I
errands
got my
too.
money.
Yes, I did
Oh,
those errands too in the
okay.
'60s, getting cigarettes for people.
Yeah,
That.
yeah, that it was quite common. I lived in Kansas City in the inner city, and so some of the older people they send you to the store, and
Yeah.
they we and you do that. They knew which kids they could trust, going to come back, bring their change back, and you were a fool if you didn't because that became a really good hustle for you to go to the store. So you took care of those older people, and they took care of you, and
That's right.
because of that, I was able to build up this incredible baseball card collection. And I think by the time I was 19, I had over 100,000 baseball cards.
Oh my
And
God.
so I studied those cards, and then I would get baseball books, and I would study not only the players, but I would learn baseball techniques, and so I played, and when I played all positions, and the way I learned how to do all those positions and man all those positions was basically through reading books. And so I would go down and I knew all the mechanics of the pitcher, and so the teams would hire me, bring me on to pitch for them, and I even got a chance to play with the grown men's team when I
Oh
was
my
15.
goodness.
We in our community, men. Some guy was late coming from work, and they needed a right fielder. I was 15, so they put me in the outfield. Didn't get a chance to bat because he showed up, right? But anyway, so that was my early introduction to baseball. But the other thing was I played on all black teams growing up. And that's really important because when I got to high school, they had integrated the high schools in Kansas City. So I ended up going to, you might say it was maybe 60% white and 40% black, somewhere in there, maybe 30 some black
Right.
and other in there. But what I noticed is that the basketball team was all black and they couldn't really survive without a all black basketball team. They wouldn't have won very many games. But when it came to baseball, a lot of my friends got cut. And I remember trying out for the team, and one of the guys, his name was Herman Randall. And these were my heroes growing up. These were teenagers in the neighborhood, and I used to watch how they wear their uniforms. Man, in our neighborhood, it was a big deal because everybody came to the park. We might have 200 or 300 people on a weeknight at the park. So,
Oh yeah.
as a little kid, we only played day games. And so you just dreamed of the night you could play night games. But Herman Randall was a couple of years older than me. So I think I was in a sophomore trying out for the baseball team. And I could pull everything down with one hand. I was pretty slick fielder. And Herman said, "Hey, you need to stop catching with one hand." I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, if you don't, you're going to be on a sophomore team." I said, "Well, we don't have a sophomore team. All we have is a JV and a varsity." He said, "That's what I'm trying to tell you." And Herman ended up going to Alcorn A&M. So, but I had people like that around me all the time. But I began to notice a lot of really good black athletes were getting cut. And then you would play these guys, and you say, "Hey, I played with these guys growing up or in the summertime." And then I would see a ball player they would keep would be a white kid, and I knew this other guy was better than him. And so that was the beginning of me beginning to know that this thing called racism in baseball, I didn't really know that it existed up until that point. And then finally, when I was probably in 11th grade, a white guy came to recruit me from my all black baseball team. And I remember I was going to go with them. They had great uniforms, and they were doing a little traveling. And I remember going back to my old black coach and telling him I was about to just jump the team and go with this other team. And he said, "Hey," he said, "if you're a great black athlete," he said, "all the white teams want you." But he said,
Yeah.
see the rest of these guys out here, they don't want them, and they don't." He said, "And they're not going to train you. You already had to be able to play to get there." And he began to wake me up. And believe it or not, those were the kind of things that I bought into this history, because when I first picked up a book on the Negro baseball leagues, I remember picking up Only the Ball Was White. Now, remember, I knew a lot about baseball.
Right.
And so I picked up Only the Ball Was White. Now, this was after I met a guy by the name of Carol Ray Malpo. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I picked up Only the Ball Was White. And I noticed that they were doing exactly what the black coach said they were doing. They would pick out certain people. So, like, you had a whole Negro league, but they're only talking about Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige. They maybe were talking about 20 people. And so when I began to write about this topic, I wanted to talk about everybody on the team. So Satchel Paige couldn't play a game by himself. He had to have a catcher. He had to have an outfield. He had to have good people around him to be a winner. And so I began to talk about some of those other people, and I began to go around doing interviews. But my first interview was really with a guy named Carol Ray Marfo in Topeka,
Man.
Kansas in 1980. And he had played for the Kansas City Monarchs from 19, actually played the first year he played with Ruth Foster's Chicago American Giants, and then he came back to the Kansas City Monarchs and played with them to 1934 when he tore his rotator cuff. And so uh, these were the people that inspired me. And of course, Eddie Dwight, who played for the Monarchs, played
Right.
outfield. Uh, he lived across the alley from us, same 100 block. I could throw a rock to his house. But I had heard people talk about he used to play for the Monarchs. But heck, I didn't know what the Monarchs were. I've just heard the old people talking. And
And,
so
and the funny thing
that's
is
how
that,
that's how I got
yeah,
started.
that's something that, that book too, Only the Ball Was White. That was my intro to Negro League baseball too. I mean, that thing, I think I got it my first year, no, last year of high school, and it just
Mhm.
blew me away. And I knew the
Yeah.
names. It's like that's a great point you made too. I knew Satchel Paige, the name. You just heard it over the years of my family. You'd hear that name, Josh Gibson, but I didn't know what was really going on. And the
Right. Didn't know
whole
why they were special.
right. And to read that, and the fact that that you brought up that people forget, they had to have other players. Obviously, you have to know about them. But a lot of folks, and even now, you still have people when they talk about the Negro Leagues, and I know these folks mean well, they limit it to certain people and forget about the other members of the team, or
Uh-huh.
what, even the owners of the team. What was going on, the travel secretaries, all this. And that's something that you really do in all your books. You
Yeah.
really are very thorough. And it's really, I'm just so,
Yeah.
I just really love your stuff because it's really, really thorough. And if you're just tuning in, by the way, I'm talking to historian, not only of Negro League history, Negro League baseball history, but history in general, Phil Dixon. And I keep saying that, Phil, because your books is something that I know you don't have to, a lot of folks would have to read between the lines. I don't with your books, but you put it out there. You really are talking about the landscape of America during that time, during the peak of the
Mhm.
Negro Leagues. And also, in a sense, because a lot of your books conclude with the landscape right now. And I want you to talk about that because a lot of folks, and I have to say, some of these folks out here, and I have to say white folks who have written books about the Negro Leagues, and they'll focus on one particular player in particular, be it someone like Cool Papa Bell or Jackie Robinson or something. They miss some aspects of the whole race issue, and I want you to talk about that because that's very important.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's quite important. I'll give you an example of something that happened early on. And he had written a number of books, a guy by the name of John Hallway.
Oh yeah.
And I remember talking to John. I said, "Hey, John, I'm thinking about doing this photographic history." So this had to be like, this was in the '80s, early '80s, right? And I said, "I'm thinking about doing this photographic history." And John said, "Oh, you'll never find the photographs that do a photographic history." And I told him I'm going to put at least 500 plus pictures in the book. And he thought it couldn't be done. And but see, what he did not know is what I knew. I knew that if I found the players, I would find the pictures because I grew up in a black family, right?
Right.
We had we had pictures, going back to the 1800s of my relatives, right? And the only way that a picture might get tossed away is if nobody knew who was in the picture, right? But people don't, we don't throw away our photographs. But if you never talk to us, you would assume we don't have anything.
Right. That is a great
And
point.
and
That is a
so I
great
went
point, Phil.
I started, yeah. I got in my car the first time I went on a road trip to interview Negro Leaguers. I started off in Kansas City, and I went to, where'd I go? Of course, I went to St. Louis, talked to Coop Papa Bell and Tweed Webb, and then from there, I think I went to Indianapolis, and there's a guy up there named Rainey Bibbs. He was deceased, but his widow was still living. And from there, I went. Let's see, where'd I go? I went to the South. I went to Buck Leonard's house in the South, and I even went to Mount Olive, Mississippi, and interviewed Howard Easterlin. He was in a nursing home.
Yeah,
I
man.
went to Joe Green's house in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And then at that particular time, they were trying to do a Black History Museum in Ashland, Kentucky. I went there too. And when I came back, I remember telling Buck O'Neill, and they did an interview with me. I said, you know what? A Negro League museum or something related about baseball, there's only three places it probably should be. I said Kansas City, Chicago, or New York, right? Of course, I'm in Kansas City, so
Right.
that's how I became a co-founder of the museum. But the very first article, the first time it's mentioned in print, it's me talking about it, and that was like 1981, 82, somewhere in there. And it's after I came back from this road trip, and I remember I stopped at Othello Renfro's house down in Atlanta. And the interesting thing, Othello Renfro was married to my cousin when he was playing baseball, and and
And you didn't know that back then?
I knew it then.
Oh,
My
okay.
cousin Louise gave me his number, so I would make sure that when I got to Atlanta, he stayed off of Peachtree, that I would get down and see him. And I went to his house, and these guys embraced me. The toughest one was really Buck Leonard, because when I went to Buck Leonard, he said, "What do you know about Negro League baseball?" And he didn't think I knew very much. Then I started talking, and here's one of the reasons why I knew so much. Once I decided I was going to do something on the subject, I went to the library and began to go through the Kansas City Call newspaper. I went every day, and I was working in the insurance business, so I was one of these what they call debit insurance people. So we pick up people's
Right.
payments and sell them insurance, and so which is a whole different story because there was a lot of black insurance companies that were still out at that time. So anyway, I would go, and I had the middle of the day, not much was happening. So I would go to the library every single day and read the old newspapers and make notes. I still have those notes today. And
Wow.
uh,
And
and
listeners, keep in mind, Phil is talking about reading. You probably you're reading the newspapers, but also weren't you reading microfiche? Were you pulling
say
that
that again
out?
now.
Weren't you also reading off microfiche and all that?
Yep, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
with the old microfilm,
Yep.
and because I lived in Kansas City, Kansas University had some newspapers that were national. So, for instance, I could go get the Philippine newspaper and read about the 25th Infantry playing. I could get the Hawaii newspaper. And Kansas University Library, because it was a university library, they would stay open till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Man.
And this is be pre-internet and all that.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure to the library. So I would go 30 miles from. I was living in Kansas City, Kansas at that time. So Lawrence was about 30 miles. I'd drive down to Lawrence at 5 o'clock. I might leave out of there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I've gone through the Indianapolis Freeman newspaper was there. And a lot of these newspapers are online now. But the unique thing of actually getting those newspapers, I didn't just bounce to the sports page. I started reading the headlines. I was reading all kind of stuff. So I ended up knowing more history by looking for the baseball history. So by the time I went out and talked to somebody, if they might begin talking about a subject, and I knew about these subjects because I had read these old newspapers, and but it really served me well. So a lot of my books have cultural history in there, and it just comes out of that whole thought of you need to read the entire newspaper
right
from a particular period. And see, with newspapers online, people go in and they put the name and it bounces them right to that page, right? So they're not reading the whole newspaper. So
they're putting a satchel page, boom, there you are. They're not looking at the rest of the Baltimore Afro, Kansas City papers, you name it. So they're not getting the essence. They're not getting what's really going on. Now, Phil, I wanted to ask you.
Never saw the front page. Never saw the front page.
No interest whatsoever in that. Mm-hmm. Now, I was curious, your take on what do you think is going on now with this? I want to say a renaissance of Negro League interest, not only study, but also I'm thinking about this new, what's it, MLB, the show, the video game that everyone's like going nuts that they put the Negro League players in there. And there's all this talk all of a sudden about Negro League baseball. And what is your take on that, being a historian for so many years?
Yeah, I look at all the things that I've seen. I see people wearing the clothing who know nothing about it. It's just cool. Right.
And that's funny. Before you go on, Phil, I got to say this. Uh-huh. Over here in Thailand, you may have saw the picture. I posted it on the Negro League Facebook site. I was in a mall one day going to the gym. Mm-hmm. I see this Thai kid with a Negro League shirt on. And I was stunned. And I took a picture of him. He didn't speak English. I didn't speak Thai, spoke a little bit, but I knew he couldn't tell me where he got it from. But I think he just got it because it looked cool. And it was from the museum, so it had all the names of the teams and all of the emblems. And you've probably seen this shirt before, but yeah, I posted it online. But there are folks out there who just they wear the stuff, but they don't really know what it really means. And I was happy to see that he wore it. It's like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah. Oh, I see it all the time. Matter of fact, I saw one guy. He was wearing this. I was at Howard University campus, and he had a jacket of the Zulu Cannibal Giants.
Oh,
I said he probably has no idea what the Zulu Cannibal Giants stood for. Why it's not the. Buck O'Neil was ashamed that he played for the Zulu Cannibal Giants, but somebody marketed a jacket. He thought it was cool, good colors or whatever. They put it on, and they have no idea. And it's the same thing with the video games and things like that. There are people who they just love video games. Period. Right.
Right.
And so, but are they getting the knowledge? And another one is with Major League Baseball teams. They will put on the Negro Leagues uniforms. They'll bring in one person and he'll be giving, and they always bring in the same person, and he's giving highlights on, with the announcers in the booth, but people are learning nothing. So it's like, I always feel like, God has told me, say, hey, you know what, keep doing what I told you to do. And what he's told me to do is to educate the people, educate the masses, to give them good information. And those who want to seek that information, they need to have good information. So keep digging and keep producing and keep talking, and and that's what I do. As a matter of fact, I just came back. Where was I? Sometimes I have to think about where I was. I was in Wichita,
Yeah.
Kansas, Wichita, and then last night I just came back from actually just a matter of hours. I was in Tulsa, and so but when I go to Tulsa, they have a Woody Guthrie Museum. I went there when I went to the Bob Dylan Museum, and I'm looking, I'm learning, I'm seeing how they're presenting things, and I think
Right.
about, okay, so how can I present something? But at the bottom of it all, it has to have good, solid research that helps to tell our story for real, not the
Right.
story that you want to make it look like Major League. I want our story told.
Just don't gloss over anything. And Phil is definitely, he does not do that at all. Phil's, it's just amazing. His books, his, those of you who are listening in Colorado in particular, you need to bring Phil out. You need to bring, I don't know, have you been to Colorado recently? Have you been there in the past couple of years?
Oh wow! The last time I was there, where was I? I was in Manitou Springs in 2016, maybe
Okay.
2015. I was in Denver. I was at the public library there, but I also spoke to like a Rotary club, and then I went on to Cheyenne, Wyoming. Interesting thing, me and my wife was with me, and we went to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we were saying, "How do you think if any black people are going to come to see you?" And believe it or not, there were more black people in my audience in Cheyenne, Wyoming than it was in Denver, Colorado, or Colorado Springs.
I believe that. Living in
Yeah,
20
in
years in
Cheyenne.
Denver, I believe that.
Yeah, but part of it is not the population in the city; it's the people who want the information.
That's it. That's the key thing. That is the main thing. Getting there, wanting the information. Well, one person I really, you talk about him often in some of your books, but who I was able to meet, uh, didn't even know he lived in the same neighborhood in Denver, but I eventually met, interviewed, and became friends with a Byron Mex Johnson. I mean,
Sure.
he was just a great guy. And one of the highlights of my life was sitting in the press box with him, looking at a Rockies game, a baseball game. And I'm just like in awe. I'm like, I'm with this black baseball, legend, because he was an all-star one time. He didn't play that long, but he was an all-star, as you know.
That's
And he,
right.
and we're just sitting there together. He's talking baseball. It's like, wow, it was just a trip, and
Yeah.
he had a Kansas City Monarch jacket on that day, and it was just
Yeah.
cool just doing that. But but you never know who's in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
You
And
never
you know
know.
what's interesting about that is, you know, Wilbur Rogan. I wrote a book about Rogan.
Yeah.
Of course, Byron Johnson's in there. But when I wrote the book on Rogan, I knew that Rogan's brother had been in prison in Leavenworth, right? So I go down to Topeka, and it just so happens they kept the prison records from Leavenworth, right? So when I go through the records, once again, you dig and you start to remember and write down important things. I saw that Rogan had relatives in Colorado Springs because his brother was writing them. See, they kept a
Oh,
record of everybody you wrote.
right.
In case you escaped, they had an idea where you might go.
Makes
So,
sense.
okay, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. But when I got out to Colorado Springs, I'm speaking in Manitou Springs, right, which is outside of Colorado Springs. A black king comes up to me, said, "Yeah, I'm Kendall Wilbur Rogan." And I
Man.
said, "You must be so and so's kid." He said, "Yeah." He said, "How'd you know that?" I said, "It's a long story," but I knew he had relatives there. So when they came to me, but what's interesting is he didn't know Rogan's relatives back in Kansas City. So I said, "I can tell you, Rogan's granddaughter. She follows me on social media. Mary Rogan." So I was able to connect them with their own family
Wow.
just by doing baseball history. But yeah, it was interesting. And then of course, they had the Denver Post tournament out there,
Oh
and
yeah,
so that's a whole history of itself. There was
yeah.
a guy
Well,
out
I've
there
done a
named
couple of shows about that tournament. That's that is something. But we,
yeah, there was
they
yeah,
gotta get you back
good
out to
history.
Colorado again. And
Yeah, good history.
yeah, I want
Yeah.
to, I could talk to you all every day about this, but because it's a Cinco de Mayo weekend for some folks who are listening, can you give us a quick Mexican league story relationship to black players? Anything you have off the top of your
Oh
head?
yeah. Well, yeah, one of the guys I used to talk to quite a bit about Mexico was Chet Brewer. And
Oh yeah.
Chet Brewer threw two no-hitters in one year. I think it was 1938 in Mexico. He went down there with his catcher, T.J. Young. Now, what's interesting, you might find is just this is the kind of things that you'll get from me. For instance, Chet Brewer's name was Chester Arthur Brewer. And his best friend that was down there catching him was T.J. Young, but his real name, he went by T.J. It was Thomas Jefferson Young. So you
Ah,
got two black guys
two
named after
presidents.
presidents pitching in Mexico in 1938. And of course, Papa Bell was down there, and I think if I'm correct, he won the Triple Crown. But uh, but the Monarchs first went to Mexico in 1932, and there was a great baseball team called the Aztecs. They would come into San Antonio down around the border, and so the Monarchs actually went into Mexico, and I picked up some information from Mr. Mothel on that one. Of course, Chet Brewer was with them. George Giles was with them, who I interviewed quite a bit. He was a good friend. He was a good friend, a good supporter. Some of these guys were really great supporters of my work. And I might mention this. I don't know. Chet Brewer threw two no hitters in Mexico, but Chet Brewer, um, when he was 4 years old, he was living in Leavenworth, Kansas, and
Uh-huh.
his foot was partially run over by a trolley car, and he lost three toes on that foot. And it's the important foot that you step down with when you're
Man.
pitching. So he pitched his entire career with that handicap. And I went out to California. I always tell people this, and it's kind of humorous story. I went out to California in 1985 and stayed at Chet's house. And he ended up taking me around to meet Buster Haywood and a whole bunch of ball players that lived around Los Angeles, right?
Right.
And but anyway, long story short, I'm spending the night at his house. So we're sitting around. So I said, "Hey, Mr. Brewer," I said, "I've been hearing all these stories about the foot. So let me see the foot." And so I can say that I did see Chet Brewer's foot without the toes. But yeah, he was actually pitched his entire career with a handicap.
Man. Because
And
they always talk
but
about
these
three finger Brown.
oh sure,
Yeah, but you
well,
don't hear that. You don't hear that
no,
about Chet.
most people have never, they don't know that story. But see, this is when you sit around and you talk to people and you talk to them long enough. And Chet Brewer used to come to Kansas City, right? And he would come back once a year. His wife Tina graduated from the high school that was, I would have went to that high school if integration didn't come along, but Sumner High School. So she would come back, and she had people friends in Kansas City, and he had played ball here. So he would rent a hotel room at the Holiday Inn, and then have a luncheon, a buffet, and then all the friends would come to him. So I would go up there, and I'd see all these people coming in, and I have my tape recorder, and I go up to his room, and I would tape him, and so I have some really good tapes of Chet Brewer that I've never released.
Yeah, I know, and I'm glad you said that because I know you got things. I think you have actually released probably 1% of what you really have. Maybe I'm
Oh yeah,
mistaken, but
no,
what are you putting things on digital? I mean, what are you doing with all this? Because you can create
well,
your own brand.
well, one thing I did with my latest Buck O'Neill book is I have 11 QR codes in the book. So if you scan those
Right.
QR codes, you hear. I think the longest one is maybe 2 minutes, but you can hear Buck being interviewed by me in 1985, and it's the earliest Buck O'Neill interview out there. It's way ahead of Ken Burns, and all of that. But the interesting thing, I asked him questions that no one was asking. So like I recently ran into Frank White, who played second base with the Kansas City Royals. And I
Yeah.
said, hey, Frank, you know what? You're in my book. I'm asking Buck, comparing you with Newt Allen, who played for the Kansas City Monarchs, who was better. So Frank said, I didn't know that. So I said, hey, Frank, here's a free book. So Frank took the book, gets home, scans it, and he calls me back. He said, man, that was some great stuff. He said, man, that was the best thing I heard. He said, thanks for doing that. But what I did was I took those cassette tapes, had them transferred to MP3, and from MP3 I had them, yeah, well, turned into digital, and then we did a QR code, and it's the first ever baseball book to use QR codes.
Yeah,
In
because
that
when
way.
I got it on Kindle and I looked at it and said, wow, Phil done gone into the 21st century with this. I said QR codes, my God. But
It
that's
works,
something. it,
and
it
and,
certainly
and
does.
I may do one with Chet Brewer. I've got Chet Brewer, Quincy Troop. I even have a guy. Uh, he was the one that Professor Lowe, Lowe, out of Memphis. He
Uh-huh.
was the one who signed Satchel Paige to his first contract
Oh
with
man.
Chattanooga. I have him on tape, uh, and I interviewed a lot of ball players' wives, children, and a lot of wives, but and a lot of children too. But I got a lot. I came along at the right time, and to
You certainly
interview
did.
some of these players, and so people like Kupapa Bell, I knew him very well. I would get my car and just drive down on a Saturday down to St. Louis, and I can't go to St. Louis today without having the memories of
Oh yeah.
all the people that I met in St. Louis, and they're all gone now. And so I'm trying to tell their story and trying to bring their story out in a very good way. I
Yeah.
might mention this too. I
Uh-huh.
haven't released this. I've got these on tape. I have two guys who played in the United States Baseball League in 1945. That was the league that
Oh,
Jackie
Prince Rich.
Robinson thought
Oh
he was.
yeah. Prince
Yeah,
Ricky's
he thought he
League.
was signing up. Yeah, yeah. So I interviewed Doc Bracken.
Oh man.
Uh, Doc Bracken pitched for St. Louis, and to get him in the league, they bought a whole team just to get one player, Doc
Right.
Bracken. And
Man.
but I have tapes that I have not released, so that's going to come. But the other thing is, like my next book I'm working on is on the 1910 Leland Giants,
Oh
and
man. All right.
yeah, and it kind of
That's
it's
the
going
year
to go
my
with my.
grandfather was born, so I'm really interested
Oh
in that one.
man, it's a good year. He's born in the census year there.
Yeah.
So it's this team, they won 123 games and lost seven. And I can tell you where they lost all seven, and I can pretty much tell you where they won all 123. But it's
I
part
want
of
to
that.
read that one too. When is
Oh,
when is that gonna
it's
come out?
I'm trying to get it done by July,
Okay,
and so
great.
I'm putting the wraps on it now. And, the hardest part has been writing the bios, um, because some players, the information online is wrong. One of them is like a guy named Pat Doherty. Um, they say he's born in Summer Shade because they got that off his death certificate, right?
Right.
But the deeper you dig, you realize that the census for Summer Shade, uh, just like a matter of months after he was born, there's no Doherty in Summer Shade. They only have 4 pages. There's no Doherty. I went through the whole 4 pages. The best I can do is come up with a Daggerty, which is a white family, and then later on I see he's mulatto. So I'm putting the
Right.
picture together like you've never seen it.
That's
But if you
amazing.
go online and you put in Wikipedia, they'll
Uh-huh.
say he's born in Summer Shade because no one ever checked it. They just went by what was on his death certificate. And the problem with his death certificate was this: it says he's born in Summer Shade, has a date and a year, and I think that year is 10 years off. But his wife supposedly gave the information. She didn't know his mother or father's name, and that doesn't make sense to me because I know black people. You
We
know,
know. Yeah.
we
Come on. I know.
yeah. So I'm thinking that whoever wrote this did not really get it from her.
it's Wikipedia. If you're going to get information from there, I'm telling my listeners this: don't depend on any Wikipedia because anyone
I
could write
understand.
on there. Anyone can
Yeah,
write
yeah.
anything on there.
Yeah,
And that's a shame.
that is very true. All they need is that little Wikipedia code that
That's it.
allows you to write in there. Yep, and
That's it. But
I have that Wikipedia code. Uh,
man,
so my wife told me, "Say, did you know someone put up a page of you?" I said, "No, I didn't know that, but I better go in there and fix
you better quickly. Yeah, that's the
it."
thing. But
Yeah, because I have the code. They put in one fact. They said he's a co-founder of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So far they haven't messed me up, but they don't really tell my story like I can tell my story.
that's
So
right. And
yeah,
I'm just glad
yeah,
that you've come on the day again. And I got to get you back on here again. And because see, Phil is very modest. He does so much, but I mean, he is a barnstormer. He's doing what the Negro League players that he's barnstorming throughout the region, throughout the Midwest, South, you name it.
yeah,
He's barnstorming. And also, Phil was a musician. He was an entertainer. He had a
yeah,
group and all, and I'm still trying to dig. I'm gonna try to find it. I know your music's out there, so I'm gonna
yeah.
surprise you on one of the shows.
There's a YouTube. There's a YouTube of one of my bands, Threatening Weather,
Oh, I
and it
got to check
says
that out.
Threatening Weather Show Band or something like Kansas City, and we're playing our theme song.
Oh
So
man,
that was like 19, I'm going to say 1974 or something. But now, what's interesting, a lot of people don't know this, that I do this because I would do it periodically. I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota last year at
uh
the
huh.
Sioux Falls Canaries game. I played the Star Spangled Banner solo. Uh, Twice in the last 3 weeks, have went and I'll give my wife who's been with me. When she's with me, she'll give them a history on Lift Every Voice and Sing,
Oh
and
man,
then we ask people to stand, and we tell them why it's called the Negro National Anthem. We have them stand, and I'll play it on solo. Now, what's interesting, I played it in one town here, a place called what was it? It was somewhere in Kansas. Anyway, a guy comes up to me afterwards, and he says, "Where'd you learn how to play?" He said, "I could tell that you know how to play." He said, "Did you play professionally?" I said, "Well, I travel with some bands and stuff like that." He said, "Me too." I said, "Well, who were you with?" He said, "I was with Mother's Finest."
oh
He said,
yeah,
he said, "I was with Wayne Cochran."
oh
And
man,
I said, and he played guitar with those groups, but he recognized that I knew how to play a little bit better than, he said he knew I
right.
wasn't no beginner. And so, but so
And
occasionally I
by the
get it
way,
out
yeah, you brought
and
up a
have
name.
fun with
Wayne
it.
Cochran is a name. That's a character in itself. The
Yep, that's right.
yeah, the white James Brown, but that's another story. But
Yeah, that's right. He was living in Florida in the '70s. So yeah,
yeah,
he he recorded on Bethlehem Records. Now, what's interesting, I don't know if the guy when he came to me, if he knew when he mentioned those groups that I would actually know that much about them. But once again, you just absorb
that's
all
right.
the data that you come across, and you're amazingly you amaze people what you can talk about.
I mean, you're amazing, Phil. I mean, the stuff you're a legend. You should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you should be in any Hall of Fame, and you're just something. But how can people reach you? They want to reach you because you are all over social media. Tell them how they can reach
Yeah, they can always reach me through if you're on Twitter, I'm at Negro League Man. That also works for Instagram. Of course, if you put in Phil S. Dixon, Phil, and then S like in Sam, and then Dixon, um, I'll come up and, it's easy to find me. I put my number there. Anybody wants to find me can. But I also have a web page, which is NLB, like Negro League Baseball, alive.com. And
you. Yeah.
in there, people access me there, and I so I try to stay out there, and there are a few places I go, a lot of places. Two places I want to go that I have not presented in quite a while is I have not presented in New York in a long time, and I haven't produced actually done anything in Chicago
Man.
since maybe 2010. But
Okay.
I've got a program, and my presentation is second to none. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
And they booked me in Chicago. I might bring my trumpet along. Who knows?
Uh-oh, watch out, Chicago. But Phil, thank you so much. I gotta get you back on here again. And
All right.
listeners, please get his books. I mean, the book, they are just incredible. But go to his website. Phil is a fountain of knowledge, just a great guy, a great humanitarian. Just he does so much. This interview and all the other interviews I've done with Phil, we just even touched the surface with Phil. But thank you so much, Phil. We'll be
All
having you
right.
back on here again. Thank you so much. You take it.
All right. I'll be
All
happy
right.
to link it up the minute you're ready.
All right. And that was the wonderful, my buddy Phil Dixon there. Just so knowledgeable, just so amazing. I just love talking to him, love reading his books, and check his website, everything he has. Just look for Phil S. Dixon online. You'll find his stuff. It's great. But we're gonna switch gears real quickly here. We're gonna do a little bit of Pancho Sanchez, the percussionist, and we're gonna play from the Live in Hollywood CD. We're gonna do Morning on the Root and Root Show.
alto saxophone.
Fishers, morning.
Mr. Andy Langham, Mr. Rob Hart. Woo!
All right, a little bit of Pancho Sanchez and Latin All Stars, and that was Morning from the Live in Hollywood CD. And we'll get to more music in it because I got to do this before I leave. I got to do this. You know, if you haven't done so, go online, look for Put Wynonie Harris in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I repeat, put Wynonie Harris in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One of the rock and roll originals, not in the Hall of Fame. Doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to play a cut from him right now before we get out of here. Let's do Wynonie Harris, Shotgun Wedding on the Root and Root Show.
There's gonna be a shotgun wedding. There's gonna be a shotgun wedding. There's gonna be a shotgun wedding here in town tonight. 'Cause my baby's man, someone else was spite tonight. I didn't get no invitation. I didn't get no invitation. I didn't get no invitation. But baby, that's still all right. I'm going to tonight. If she can't be mine, she won't be his neither. I mean that thing, I ain't lying. I sure ain't lying neither. I'm going around there, shoot out all the lights tonight. Your boots, I ain't just a jiving. I'll be there, baby, when the people start arriving. Cause my baby's man someone else for spite. Tonight, there's gonna be a shotgun wedding. There's gonna be a shotgun wedding. There's gonna be a shotgun wedding here in town tonight. I'm going around there, shoot out all the lights.
All right, the great one and only originator himself, Wynonie Harris, and they're going to be a shotgun wedding. And please go on Facebook and look for the site. Put Wynonie Harris in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Also go to change.org. Look for Put Wynonie Harris in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sign the petition, trying to get him in there for next year. Hopefully he will get it. He will get in there. We did this for Rosetta Tharpe way back when. Back about, almost 15 years ago. Got her in. We're going to do the same for Wynonie Harris. And if you don't know his music, check out the petition. Go to the Facebook site. And keep on listening to this program because we play his music all the time. But anyway, I just want to thank you for listening in today. Thank you for having Phil Dixon on. A great guy, great historian, just a great person. We'll have him on again. But again, we say go in love and go in peace on the Root and Root Show. Help someone along the way, wherever you are in the world. Also, love yourself because you can't love anyone. You can't do anything till you love yourself. So love yourself. Help someone along the way, and just know that we're in this together. We're all in this together, no matter where you are, what prefecture, what community, township, wherever you are, we're all in this together. So again, this is Greg Rashid. Go in love and go in peace. You can check me out on Facebook if you want to talk to me, as a lot of people do, at Greg Rashid, RASHEED on Facebook. Go in love and go in peace. See you next time on the Root and Root Show.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. And remember, spread the knowledge, share the power.